Hey guys, what's up? It's Marissa from. Bleh. Hey guys, it's Marissa from Bush Past Paralysis, back with another video. And today I'm gonna do a kind of recap. What's my opinion on the Casey Anthony docuseries? Now, first of all, I had to watch it twice, which was torture, which is kind of foreshadowing of how I feel about this video. But my email was kind of weird, and it deleted the draft that I had of all of my notes. So I had to watch it again because it wasn't in trash, it wasn't anywhere. So I had to watch it twice. Now, I watched the entire trial when it was on. I was like engrossed in it. I thought Casey Anthony was 1,000% guilty. I thought how they were treating George was unfair. And I did not have any doubt whatsoever of what happened to that child. That was then. So I'm gonna be looking down a little bit and reading some of my notes, and I'll stop periodically to elaborate. So, okay. One thing I noted from the beginning, and it was continuous throughout. Casey, when she was in her interview mode, like when she was just talking to the camera and wasn't, they weren't showing something else, she was very emotionless, stoic, serious, fake, rehearsed. Maybe part of that was nerves. I'll give her a little bit of the benefit of the doubt with that. Maybe she was just nervous. But it just did not come across to me as genuine or truthful. And right off the bat, let me just say it's Casey Anthony. She lied about everything, so I don't care why she lied. She lied about something this life or death serious. No excuse for that, ever. But we'll get into that. I did see what I thought was genuine emotion of grief from her a few times. When she broke down and cried within the settings of the documentary, not when she was being interviewed, I did feel that was genuine, which was surprising. She said something, and I didn't get the exact quote in my notes this time, but it came across to me that she was resentful that the entire world was still grieving her kid. Now, maybe that's partially because she knows that in the world's grief, the majority of people are directing their anger about it at her, which I can understand. Regardless if she's guilty or innocent, she's not going to like that. So that I kind of got. One of the detectives or one of the investigators in the case noted that her social calendar became full after Caylee's death. Now, within the documentary, we find out from Casey, and I say that on purpose because she lies, that her dad told her to make up all these lies and make up a bunch of shit for the 31 days that Caylee was missing. There was things in her social calendar and pictures that coincided, and yes, she claimed that it was over a period of time, but the investigator also looked at her photos and saw how close they were. Make of that what you will. She claimed that the Bella Vita tattoo that she got after Caylee went missing, which before she was found, by the way, she got that tattoo. She claims it was a fuck you to her family. But I still cannot rationalize why you would think you have a beautiful life after your kid is dead. Now, I have thoughts about Cindy, which I've always kind of thought about her, but I'll get into that later. I will say that in the beginning, when they played the two phone calls, well, the one phone call to report Caylee missing, Cindy gets on the phone in hysterics. Now, you could say she's rehearsed and dramatic, but I felt that was genuine. And then they put Casey on the phone, and she, serious and stoic, was, oh, my daughter's been missing for the last 31 days. And the last person I saw her with was Zenaida Gonzalez, babysitter from Thin Air. Something that Casey said was, everything that I said, there was partial truth and partial lie. So, what makes you think that we're not going to think the same thing when you're telling us now? And I know she didn't have creative control of the documentary, but she knew if she said enough, she could sway people to think a certain way. The investigators also found chats with friends online and through text message where she would talk about the burdens of being a mother. Now, I get it. She was young and you're going to talk to your friends, but adding to it, going out, adding to it that your daughter is missing and you're not saying anything, kind of weird. Okay, now, Casey's one friend, the girl that was interviewed, I don't know what to make of her. It was an ex-friend, but she still sounds like she was sticking up for her. She has a tattoo memorializing Caylee. She said, until she tells me, I won't believe she did it. So until a known liar tells you something, you're not going to believe it. Moving on. Okay, now here is an unpopular opinion. I don't trust the timing of this documentary. Everybody's claiming they're now free to tell their stories, free to use their voices. Why? Because you shamed the entire public that if they don't believe a woman about anything, they're in the wrong. I will get to my thoughts about what she says happened to her, because I'll get to my thoughts. But I feel like she used what happened to her to make the public believe everything else, and make them memory hole them into forgetting that she was a known liar. This goes back to the truth and a lie, because I don't think she was being dishonest about everything. So we'll get to that. One thing that people are forgetting, and people were kind of reminded about some of it in the documentary, is she now works for her legal team. It felt like they were still trying to play the case, so they were gonna all say the same shit. But she studied criminal law, and she also studied psychology in jail. So you mean to tell me she's not going to use this to her advantage and try to portray her innocence, even now? And another example of the legal team still trying to play the case is about the dead body. They're trying to say that the prosecution, was lying about the smell of the dead body in the car, and there was no actual science and proof. Contrary to the last 2 years of all of our lives, science is not absolute. So if one scientist or one cadaver dog says that there was a dead body, and just because another one didn't, who the hell knows? There probably was. Okay, now here's what I think about Casey's life. I do believe she was abused. She goes into way too much detail that would slander and falsely accuse an innocent man on camera, and she's a big name, unfortunately, to be lying about that. And she doesn't just use the buzzwords. She goes into detail beyond that. Like, she's not just trying to get some women who have been raped to believe her. She goes into detail. So I do believe her. And I'm not saying that just so I'm not attacked. I genuinely believe something happened to her in that way. Now, two things can be true. While I believe she was raped, I do not think that's an excuse if she murdered her daughter. Nor do I think because her father could be an alleged rapist that means he killed his granddaughter. And it kind of felt like she kept using it as an excuse for her behavior, for her lies, listen. And she claims she's been in therapy and all this, but she's still using these things as an excuse. I don't fault somebody for something happening to them. What happened to you was not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal from it. She has not. Clearly has not. Because she's using... It felt like, on one hand, she was like using everything as an excuse of why she is the way she is, which to me said why I killed my daughter. But yet at the same time, could have been very angry at her father for what he did to her and is trying to frame him and using what he did to her as an excuse for framing him. Okay, now, there was a part that initially, like I said, I watched this twice. Initially, I was like, oh my God, he might have done it. When they talked about the burying of the animals. Now, I think I had seen that interview. No, that part wasn't an interview. That part was just talked about. But I could have swore I heard something about the burying of the animals at some point. But it was in detail that how their animals were always buried was how Caylee was found. Now, if it's your dad, like I said, and he's doing things to you on top of you just seeing his behavior, you can replicate that and use it to frame him. Oh, because it's something he did, they're going to think that he did this. She could have easily remembered how he wrapped and buried their animals and done that to her kid. Like I said, it could go either way. I'm not an investigator. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just discussing what it could be without attachment to, oh, because suddenly this part is being exposed, he's 100% guilty. Okay, one thing I did find weird was George was questioned, but he was never considered a suspect. And it goes beyond him. Nobody but Casey was considered a suspect. Now, maybe that's just down to, okay, she was the last person who saw her, who saw the baby. Which is fine. But they never made a big deal about any of the other people in that house. Weird. Okay, now I want to talk about the defense narrative. Casey claims she didn't know what her lawyers were going to say. If your lawyers are trying to get you off of murdering your kid and you tell them that you were raped and you lived with your father who did it, they're going to use him as, oh, this is why she didn't do it. Because he did. Because he raped her. It's bullshit that she didn't know that was what they were going to say. And a lot of people are saying now, okay, why did he advocate for the death penalty? Or, I mean, I think the prosecution decided that based on the manner of death of the baby. But why did he go so hardcore against her to be the key witness and be on the stand how many times? Maybe he was trying to cover up that he did it, but also maybe he was just seeing red and couldn't take back prosecuting, like, being a witness against her. Listen, I know somebody who was falsely accused of somebody, and when that whole process was going on, you say some really mean shit about the person who's trying to frame you and about the person who actually ultimately did it. It is what it is. That doesn't mean that he necessarily was trying to cover up that he did it. He could have been. But he also might have just been seeing red, being accused of that, and was like, well, fuck it, I'm just, like, get me on the stand. Okay. Attached to that, George initially said that Casey was innocent. If you go back. Now, people are making a big deal about that to accuse him of guilt, but I think it changed when they tried to frame him. When he knew they were going to try to turn it and frame him, he no longer, caution was to the wind. He didn't even give a fuck anymore. And I can't blame him. If he was innocent, I can't blame him for that. Okay, now we're going to talk about Cindy. She's getting lost in all of this. And I was suspicious of her behavior. I'm not saying of her, like, if she did it or anything. I was just always suspicious of her from the beginning. I felt very bad for George. I thought Caylee was a murderer, and Cindy rubbed me the wrong way. And she's getting lost in this because it was all Caylee, and then a few people thought it was George, and then everything is now piled up against George. A smear campaign. And then Cindy's just sitting pretty in the middle, manipulating everything. She was very manipulative, according to Caylee, who's a liar, but I could see it a little bit. She was a manipulator. Now, if you look in her interviews, and this is where, when they talk about George conflating his stories and saying one thing to the cameras and one thing to the prosecutors, you can look at that as a lie, but you're forgetting one main point. You have to look at, is Cindy present? Because he says something consistent when she's gone and something consistent when she's there. The story is always determinative on, is Cindy there? He thinks Caylee is innocent when he thinks Caylee is innocent when Cindy's there, and doesn't when she's not there. She's controlling him, because she will flat out say, but you don't think she did it on purpose, do you? And no. Okay. She's very manipulative and controlling with that. So is she pulling the strings, or was George an ex-cop? Now, in that part where they showed the clip of Cindy correcting George, Caylee kind of lights up and uses that as an excuse to further her narrative again. Look, see, my mom believes me, and she's exposing him and correcting him, instead of the real story, which could be that Cindy was manipulating him and controlling him and taking control of the interview. Okay, now I want to talk about how supposedly George was telling her what to do during the 31 days. Well, then why are you so calm? Why are you going out and you're so calm? You couldn't have found another way to play the part that he was behind the scenes telling you what to say and what to do? You didn't have to go on top of bars. You didn't have to, make bad checks. You didn't have to lie. It's just, and I get it. People exhibit trauma a different way. Heal your fucking trauma and stop using it as an excuse. Especially to this degree. Like, I could see little things staying with you your whole life, and I feel bad for everybody who's experienced trauma, but it's an insult to people who actually have bettered their life after trauma to potentially be using it as an excuse for your behavior and potentially why you killed your kid. Because we still don't know. She says something that I just found really weird, and I would want to know further what she meant. She was talking about how she let Caylee dress herself and feed herself. So you did that and partied. You didn't want to be a parent at all? No direction? Like I said earlier, Casey was very angry through a lot of the interviews. When she was in the interview setting, she was very stoic and angry. And one time in particular, she kind of seized when she talked about how infectious Caylee was in people's lives. Like, she was jealous that she was now the spotlight. Now, here's where I don't think she forgot, and I think Casey was being very careful at certain points. She, like I said, she knew what to say. Her whole legal team was behind the scenes, being supportive, trying to tell her what to say, is what I believe. All of a sudden, after all of this talk about what her dad did, she thinks she didn't give consent. Now, I'm not saying. Wait. Now, after all this, she thinks she didn't give Caylee's father consent. Now, everybody's raping her now? Everybody? I'm sorry. When you think you didn't give somebody consent, I can't. No, I can't. She didn't. She says something about how she didn't want her kid to grow up thinking she was the product of rape. Well, instead of killing her, maybe you could have, like, told her how amazing she was and that God wanted her here and all this stuff that many kids who were born out of rape are told. And if you killed her, and if that's why you killed her, shame on you. Okay, here's where it really bothers me. Okay, I get, like I said, when somebody who was abused or raped uses coping mechanisms and covers up and lies, I get it. But I feel like Casey is taking all of this to the extreme because she knows somebody is going to stand up for her now. Just because of what she's saying. She said, I lied, but no one asked why. If you lie, let's say you have an eating disorder and you lie and say that you ate. And people know that, you're struggling. They're going to ask why you lied. Or if they don't know you're struggling and they know later that you struggled, they're going to ask why and be compassionate to your story. If you're afraid of a relationship, or even the opposite, if you're promiscuous, and people want to know why, you might open up about a rape. But to lie when your daughter is missing and lie about almost every single solitary part of your life, beyond just because I know she mentioned that she was planning to get out and didn't want people telling her dad, so she lied. But there was things not even connected to any of that she was just lying. And now she's trying to cover it up and make excuses. And if any of this is true that she was saying, I'm sorry, but you've lied so many times. It's the girl who cried wolf. I'm not saying I don't believe that she was raped, but all of these lies surrounding Caylee's death, I don't believe her. I don't. And I don't believe he was there the whole time orchestrating behind the scenes. I just don't. Every time that the investigators were interviewed, or every time they showed a clip of the investigators, they were tearing up and emotional much more than Casey was. It was very weird. Casey said something that was very chilling. Because for a lot of the docuseries, she said she still wants to know what happened. She still doesn't know. But she said, I know you want to ask me about the last day she was here and why I didn't do this or that. And she was not ready to talk about it. So you know something then that you don't want to say. Because it's again going to make you look guilty. What is it? Then she says that on the last day, they went for a nap and Caylee was missing when she woke up. Now, okay, if your kid drowned or was found by a pool, which is the most common way to die in Florida, you're not going to cover it up and make it look like a murder. And you're not going to wait for 31 days if you wake up and your kid is missing. You're going to call everyone, including the cops, that day. Okay, and if you don't like cops because your dad was a cop and you don't like him, you're going to call somebody and freak the fuck out that day. Not 31 days later and you're still calm while your mom's in hysterics on the phone. Okay, then they showed this lady who was her cellmate or in the cell next to her or something, and she had letters that her and Casey had exchanged back when all this was going on. Was I the only one who noticed that the paper was perfect? Yeah, it was sealed, but I mean, it was perfect paper. Looked new to me. Okay. In one of those letters to her cellmate or her friend or whatever, she says, I think my dad used to do that to me. Now, I think it's perfectly normal and fine to have fuzzy memories and triggers come back, triggering a fuzzy memory. That is understandable. But you think he did, and yet your entire defense team is based on that he absolutely did. Makes no sense. And mind you, I do think he did. Like, I'm not saying he didn't, because we'll get to the creepy shit. But her language, I'm a big words person. A little sketchy. She said she felt anger, grief, sadness, and shame. Is that why she framed him? If she actually framed him and he didn't do it, is that why? Okay, now she kind of made it sound like she was pretending nothing was wrong during those 31 days because he told her to, or because she was numb or whatever. But that's different than blatant, calculated, and very detailed lies. She made up a person and where this person lived that watched her kid. One thing that really stood out to me was if George was doing all of this to her when she was growing up, why live with him when you're still pregnant? And I know she said she should have left then, and what's done is done. If she could go back, and why didn't you? Like, why didn't you care enough about your kid or yourself to get out if in fact you were worried he was going to do it to her? Most women I know who have been abused, who have children, want to get as far the fuck away as possible. Even if they are temporarily stuck, they are finding ways to get out. Her phone pinged at home, and I don't remember why I found this. I did. She had lived at home. Her phone pinged at home, but they didn't check George's, and for some reason I just found that weird. I don't remember the context. Now, because Casey's a liar, I have to. Like, I'm not victim shaming. But if there's two major cases that have happened in my lifetime that I could cite, the Casey Anthony case and the O.J. Simpson case. And if this was a man, we would be having a different conversation, I think. And he wrote a book, If I Did It, basically orchestrating everything that he would have done if he killed his wife. So you don't think Casey's doing the same with this? Trying to, but in a different way, like framing her dad, like this is what really happened, but using her imagination for a lot of this shit, because she's saying stuff that happened to her, but then inferring a lot of things that she thinks happened. And she's very careful about it, like I said, because she knows she could get legally in trouble if she says some things as fact. Another time where she kind of alludes to the fact that she knows what happened was she's never had a conversation, because they were talking about her legal team and stuff. She's never had an in-depth conversation with anyone about what happened. But wait, I thought you didn't know what happened. How can you have an in-depth conversation about something you don't know anything about? So like I said, the family is whacked, and I did find it weird that they had a brand new boat that they designed and were raising money the day that the news broke that Caylee's remains were found. That was weird. I'm not saying none of these people are weird. They're weird. And I think everybody had something to do with it. But I think taking too much heat off of Casey is not accurate. Her legal team is full of bleeding hearts, which you can't have when you're in law. I'm not saying don't care about people, but they were way too much of when they saw this young, small, innocent girl. What about the young, small, innocent girl that was freaking thrown in a body bag and thrown into the woods? Okay, now the counselor. I get it, everybody grieves different. Even within my own family, the losses that we've had, all three of us who are here, grieve different. Same with my extended family. But there's a difference between a reluctant griever, which this person said is typical for young people, and somebody who is the antithesis of grieving. She didn't act like she was grieving at all. Now, I don't know who said it in the docuseries, and mind you, go watch it if you don't believe me about any of this stuff, because it's there. Somebody says, she told me what happened to Caylee. She didn't disclose it for court. If you're so innocent, why wouldn't you want people to know? If you're going to go the extra miles of slandering your father on TV, fine, tell your story about what he did to you, but if you're going to slander him and call him a murderer, why don't you just tell everything that you know? Damage is already done. Caylee's already dead. Again, I had down about the defense team not telling Caylee. Again, I had down about the defense team not telling Casey the angle that they were going to go. It just seemed like it was all for TV. If this was a trial, millions of babies go missing every day. Like, if this was not televised, not like this big trial, we probably hear rumblings more of the truth. It just seems like theater and a reality show. Okay, during when Caylee was missing, Casey says her thoughts were, I'm not good enough because of all the things that happened to me. So she was thinking of herself in the moments when she should have been focused on her daughter. Par for the course with her. Dancing on bars, getting junk food for house parties. Okay. Now, her legal team all says a variation of this one thing. Casey has never told me what happened, but I think it was an accident. So again, you know she knows. You know that she knows something, or knows exactly what happened. But in the beginning, she says she doesn't know. Now, there was a lot of talk about drowning, and I think that was part of what they used of how she died. Like, they claimed that George raped Casey, but they said that Caylee drowned. Now, that's the most popular way to die in Florida, so that was an easy thing to take out of thin air. But the investigators asked about that, and she said no. Now, you could go back to, okay, was she lying about that too? But again, if it's the most popular way to die, and it's par for the course in Florida, why go through so much trouble covering it up? You wouldn't have been a family under a microscope, and maybe you wanted to be. Maybe that's what this whole thing is about, fame. But it would have just been normal. Nobody would have been accused of anything if you would have just shut up and it was a drowning, instead of covering it up. If she was found in the pool and not 15 houses down in the woods, I don't know. And she also did go along with her being wet when she was found too. So I don't know. Again, Casey talking out of both sides of her mouth. I think at this point, the entire family played a part and knows something, and they're all gonna burn in hell. All of them. Whether it was Cindy manipulating, whether it was George raping, whether it was Casey killing, all of them are guilty of something, and they're gonna burn in hell. Bottom line, and we have to get back to what really matters, which is that a child was murdered. Because it makes me sick when Casey Anthony trends, and when Casey Anthony is on TV, it should be about Caylee. Sorry. Caylee Anthony. That's it. And the bottom line also is, if the family is innocent, they lost a daughter and a granddaughter. Which is part of why I felt bad for them this whole time. Even Casey's old friend Clint said that the only reason George testified was because of the allegations against him, which I agree with. But then the interviewer kind of manipulates Clint and tells him about, different things with George, and explaining the lies and trauma. It was almost like shaming him in the moment for blaming a victim of rape and trauma for murder. Or just because you've been through something doesn't make you innocent for the whole rest of your life. Doesn't mean that you're not going to take that trauma and do something terrible with it. So what, are we going to just let murderers off the hook now because they went through trauma too? I think that, and I've always thought that the woman who George cheated with just wanted fame. Period. That's it. And when I was talking about the phone pinging at home, they only had Casey's phone records, which I did find weird. They didn't get the phone records of anybody else in the house. So not questioning them and not getting the phone records, a little weird. See, I'm still up in the air with a lot of things. I can't place some things. I just don't believe the absolutes on George. I don't think one means the other. Because the entire family lied during the investigation. So it's like, take your pick. Okay, now when they showed the clip of Dr. Oz, again, going back to what I said about pay attention to George and whether or not Cindy is there. George starts crying and wants to apologize to Casey and his entire family for what he's done. Cindy freaks out and says, "You didn't do anything. You have nothing to be sorry about. It was an accident." He goes, "I don't know what I have to do to be forgiven. That's something I have to hear from Casey." So he's implying that she's mad at him for doing something, which goes to her narrative and to her credit of blaming him. Then they show the funeral. Now, I don't remember this part. I know it was televised. I know everybody saw it, but I just don't remember him saying that he missed the smell of her sweat. Now, he said he missed her hair smell, or her smell, or something. Okay, fine. You could miss the smell of a baby. Mothers say that all the time. But when you get to kind of like Joe sniffing kids and liking their sweat, you're a pedophile. Sorry. But like I said, the pedophile and rapist doesn't always equal murder. So that I still can't connect fully. It's possible, but it's also possible that Casey still did it and has paid attention all these years, and is really into those acting, and cause she did say that too. I forgot to mention she wanted to get into acting at some point over the last several years. So between that and her learning a lot about criminal stuff and investigations and psychology, I don't trust her even more than I did when she was just a lying young girl. Yeah, so Casey at some point said, "You want me to tell you what happened, but I'm not ready, not today." So she knows. So anytime in the whole docuseries or in the whole trial when she said, "I want to know what happened to my daughter too, I don't know," she knows. I think Cindy is extremely codependent and a control freak about everything. That's for sure. That's probably one of the only things I know is, out of all of this, is that Cindy is a manipulative, controlling, codependent freak. I already talked about her lies and it going beyond just trying to get out of the house. One thing I did feel bad for Casey. I mean, at some point, everybody's human. Cindy making her feel guilty. Like, she was always trying to make her stay young and make her feel guilty for any decisions she made privately about her and Caylee. That wasn't fair, especially as an adult when you're over 18 and 21, regardless of if you have a kid. Your parent having that much control is not fair to you. Now, Casey mentioned the word allegedly when it was talking about Zanny the nanny too, because they brought her again to the place that Zanny lived. She said allegedly. So you claim you've been there, but you say allegedly because you know she didn't live there, because you know she didn't exist. Pay attention. I hope people who are sold on George go back and watch this again without your emotions, because a lot of it was she wanted people to relate to her and her story and swing people. Watch it twice like I did. I've been through 3 different scenarios of what I think now. Originally thinking Casey was 100% guilty, then watching it and questioning George. Now I'm like, throw the whole family away. So I think it was Casey who said that if the police found her, yeah, she said it because she wanted any abuse on Caylee to be found. She said that if he drowned her, it was because they would only rule it as a drowning and wouldn't investigate on her body further about anything. I think they kind of should and would, because it's a child who was found dead. Maybe look for other injuries. But again, if it was a drowning, why cover it up? Unless they were covering up the other abuse. But the whole trial and spectacle of everything, why, if you were just, it would almost be a relief that the rape or abuse was covered up and it was just a drowning, and then you could just, rule it as the most popular way to die in Florida and grieve and move on with your life. The alternative just doesn't make sense. again, she mentions the words, I'm sure. That's not an absolute memory. She says, I'm sure there were times I was incapacitated and my body was lifeless as a child. I'm sure isn't the same as I remember that, or that memory came back to me, or not being sure if she consented when she had sex with the father of Caylee. The lawyer had said because she was there that day. So, okay, if she's there and there are rumblings of her saying that she knew what happened, what the fuck happened? And therein lies the whole thing. I'll close with this. People are hooked on this like a reality show because they want closure. Casey wants attention and to bank on this. So you're going to say all this shit about your dad and the boat and the fundraisers or whatever after your daughter's death, but now you're cashing in. Just because she didn't have creative control, she got paid to be interviewed on this thing. Don't fool yourself to think she didn't. That whole family is messed up. We may never know exactly what happened. I do think, like I said, Casey was raped. I do think Casey had a big part in this. I'm not sold on the George thing, other than he is a child molester, which is terrible. Like I said with the whole animals thing, you could replicate something you saw your parent do a bunch of times, especially if it's in your head you want to frame them. I don't know. I do know that this case meant a lot to me when I was on, because I have a bleeding heart for kids. And it was terrible, and I still see Caylee's face. I have a picture of her, which I'm going to use as the thumbnail for this, in my Facebook. We all shared that one picture of her that was going viral. It was the main picture that they all use for her on the news. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. Not that, because I don't believe for a second that they're still trying to actually solve the case and figure out what happened. That's the only reason they can even really talk about it, is because she was proclaimed innocent, so they don't know what happened. So they're just going to keep coming back to, we don't know what happened, let's make another TV show about it. And we're all stupid enough, because we love that kid, who we never met, to tune in for answers. But it's just clicks and attention and money for all of the people who played a part. And it's sickening. So that's my thoughts. Not much else to say. I feel bad for that kid. She got a raw deal with that family, and I'm not gonna say she's better off where she is. She did not deserve to die. Hell, if I was down there in Florida, I would have adopted her. If that family was popular in that area or across Florida, and I heard any of this stuff was going on before she was found missing, I would have taken that kid in a second. Not kidnapped her, but like legitimately by law, like gotten her. But yeah, it's terrible. And I hope this is not a new trend where we're going to be seeing Casey's face everywhere, because she just makes me sick. I didn't even want to watch, but like I said, I was curious, and I was nervous to watch and really didn't want to until a friend of mine was like, "No, you gotta watch. You're gonna think it's George. You're gonna change your mind." And who knows? All I know now is I don't think she was lying about being raped. That's about as new information as I got. So yeah, what do you guys think? I know this is a very tense subject even all these years later, and it's been opened up again with the new docuseries. What do you guys think? Who do you think did it? Why? And just play nice in the comments because I will be reading them and I will delete you if you get hateful. Alright, so if you're new here, please subscribe. Thank you for coming back if you're one of my returning subscribers, and I will talk to you next time.